Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Crash and Ride podcast. I'm Patrick Ferguson. I'm your host. Today's guest is Anthony Aparo, a singer-songwriter based out of Atlanta, Georgia. He's also a session musician who plays a multitude of instruments, including bass, guitar, keys, cello, drums. He's a really talented guy. We had a really long conversation. We talked about depression and divorce and drugs and meds and an adolescence spent contemplating the void. It was a really good conversation. We found out we had a lot in common, even though he's a lot younger than I am. And we talk about some projects we worked on together. I hope you enjoy the conversation. I want to, again, thank everybody who's signed up for monthly subscriptions on the Patreon page. We had somebody step up to the tune of $100 a month just the last few days, and I'm absolutely floored and so grateful for the support and feedback I'm getting from people. Seems like we're helping people. We're making a difference in people's lives. I'm just so stoked about that. I hope that we can continue to do this for a really long time. Pinky Doodle Poodle and 5'8" did our 4-day run down to Florida and back. I played 7 shows in 3 days. We had a special secret unannounced show that Pinky Doodle Poodle played at Record Store Day in Tampa at Microgroove. Keith and the staff at Microgroove made us feel super welcome. It was a great show. It was a great time. I also got to do an interview with Susie Ulrey, the singer from Pogo. She's one half of the new Granada Records partnership and wife of Keith, who owns Microgroove. She and I had a great conversation. She's a really talented singer-songwriter who is struggling with multiple sclerosis, and we talk about that and how that affects her quality of life. And it was a really good conversation, and I hope you enjoyed it. It'll be out in 4 or 5 weeks. In the meantime, Pinky Doodle Poodle has a tour coming up. I want to give you those dates just in case you're around. April 25th, Pinky Doodle Poodle is playing with Lacey Jags and Salt Palace at the Nightlight Bar and Grill in Chapel Hill. April 27th, we play in Brooklyn at the Sakura Festival at 4:15 p.m. at the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens. May 1st, we play in Canton, Ohio at the Buzzbin Arts and Music Shop. May 4th, Pinky Doodle Poodle is playing in Buffalo, New York at the Buffalo History Museum as part of the Cherry Blossom Festival. We're playing at 1:30 p.m. We're playing the next day, also part of the Cherry Blossom Festival, May 5th at the Buffalo History Museum, but we're playing at 12:15 p.m. on the 5th. May 6th, we play in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at Howlers, and then May 8th, we're playing in Spartanburg, South Carolina at Ground Zero. I'm super stoked to be hitting Buffalo and Pittsburgh in the same tour, 2 of my favorite former Rust Belt cities. They're both full of people I care about, and I'm really looking forward to seeing. I hope you'll come out too. If you hear this and you live in any of those cities, please come out and say hi. Shake my hand, we'll talk it out, and have a good time. I also want to remind everybody that if you're having a tough time, you feel like you need someone to talk to, maybe you're having some dark thoughts about self-harm and you don't know where to turn, remember you can always call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. It's 1-800-273-8255. It's 24/7. It's free. It's confidential. They're always there to listen if you need them. 1-800-273-8255. Give them a call. Let's jump into our interview with Anthony Aparo. All right, we're here with Anthony Aparo, singer-songwriter I've worked with off and on now for like 7-8 years. We worked on that Mr. Mustache record together.
I was just a little bambino.
Man, it was amazing, though, because you came in, and I guess you were probably 18?
Yeah.
And you were saying things like, I feel like that reverb send is a little too shiny. Could you kind of knock down 6K a little? And I'd be like, you're not even old enough to vote yet. How do you know these things? You know? So you had a really early start in music.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
I probably started in GarageBand for the first time at like 11, you know? And, oh yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Get right on that mic.
You know, Studio Basics 101.
Right.
I started in GarageBand, and I made really terrible beats that I thought were fire, and, you know, would take them to my middle school friends and be like, check this out, guys, on my iPod Classic. Here's a beat I made. You know, and they would all be very encouraging.
Yeah.
And then I think the first time I ever made real music, I did my 8th grade talent show, and I sang Old Man by Neil Young. I was petrified. It was so fucking
I'm
awful.
I guess you can't see the sort of, if you're listening to this on your podcast app, you're not seeing how flummoxed I am to know that Anthony learned, old man, when he was in 8th. You're 14.
Yeah,
You're
I
not
was
even legally
14.
Driving yet.
No.
And well, Neil Young made that record when he was 24.
Yeah, so that's frustrating.
Right.
So like, whatever.
It's just kind of astonishing.
What was in the water, man? Like, how were all these
Drugs.
dudes? It was drugs.
Yeah.
It was drugs in the water. It always comes back to that.
I've said many times, drugs are a fantastic productivity tool in a lot of situations. Is with respect to, like, my house has never been cleaner than when I was dabbling in stimulants, Yeah. And there's a band that I absolutely loved for the like hot minute that they were hot, and they had been a really terrible band, and then they got into opiates, and it silenced the little critic in your head that says, "Don't write that riff. It's a Keith Richards riff." And and they just wrote like 2 records of absolutely blistering rock and roll. But the problem with drugs as a productivity tool is the arc ends with them destroying you.
Yeah, of course. It's a self-destructive mechanism. Like it's built to give you an inhuman result in an inhuman amount of time,
right,
for an inhumane cost.
Right.
And it's like, I mean, sure, live fast, I guess, but Neil
skyrocketed up there with, like, he made some really brilliant stuff, and then there was the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the goal would obviously be, if you're using a drug and it really helps you get your thing, make sure you can also do that thing without it, though, because
right.
I mean,
yeah,
I get it. I have a particular result if I'm eating some mushrooms and getting on a session.
Yeah, and
sometimes it's useful, but other times, I just kind of want to go outside and lay it down in a flower bed, and that's not very productive.
Right. Hey, man, clock's running here. Where's Anthony?
You're like, dude, he's gone.
He's out there in the daffodils on his back. Yeah.
Yeah. So
you started writing beats. You're a hip hop fan in middle school?
I was into it. I listened to. My brother was a good conduit for a lot of what I was listening to.
How many brothers do you have? Just one?
Just one. Yeah, brother and a sister.
He's older?
Yeah, they're both about 10 years older.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I was getting the good stuff at a relatively young age compared to my peers. So my brother showed me Outkast and showed me Nas and Common and Biggie and all this stuff. And then, I worked at a skate shop also. So
you're a skater?
Oh, yeah.
With both of my interviews today have been with skaters.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what's your favorite stick?
I rode Anti-Hero before I quit.
Yeah.
All the deluxe stuff was like my vibe.
Yeah. I had a GNS street board. It was called the Ditch and something board. It wasn't a ramp board. It was really made specifically for street skating. Because I was never a ramp guy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I couldn't get too much into it. I was like a technical ledge guy. I liked doing ledge stuff or like rails, small rails.
Yeah, yeah. I was really into downhill, though. I love the rush. I had a longboard.
Yeah.
Madrid 33 and a third longboard with a set of Indy 215s and the Crypto street wheels, and it was like riding on glass.
Oh, yeah.
But I would get up to speeds that there were sometimes I would be squatted down on the board, and I'd think, if I fell off right now, it'd be real bad.
Oh, yeah. It's you're real close.
Yeah.
You're just right there on that edge the whole time.
Yeah, but man, I loved it. And then I guess it was the Metallica tour where Kirk Hammett fell off his skateboard and broke his wrist, like at the beginning of the tour.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's such a late '80s Metallica story. I guess it just all makes sense.
Yeah, and that one of the roadies played guitar.
Wow,
for that whole tour. Imagine being sent home because you fell off a skateboard in a parking garage before your show and broke your wrist.
I want to hear the story of the guy that was on the crew that was like, "What's up?"
Well, he was the guitar tech.
So he just kind of probably already...
He had already been checking those songs. I'm sure Metallica wasn't doing their own sound checks. They were down in the parking garage where the bus was skateboarding.
Breaking wrists.
Breaking the wrist.
Breaking hearts and breaking wrists.
I had a band come stay with me one time. A band called Brutal Juice from somewhere in Texas. I think they were a Dallas band.
Oh, what a great name.
Yeah, and Brutal Juice's guitar player broke his wrist.
Here?
Right in front of my house on Clover Street here in Athens.
Oh, no.
They had a day off, and I had some rollerblades for some reason. And
no grown man should put on a pair of rollerblades.
I don't know why I had them. I think it was one of those things where I was like, I could flip these and sell them, you know?
I thought you were about to say I could flip these, like I could do a flip in these.
Nope. Never got on. I think I wore them once. Skinned my knee pretty bad. I was like, nope. But right, he fell off of those things and broke his wrist, took an emergency room, cost him a fortune. You know, no, that was back in the days when there was no such thing as Obamacare, and like you were just on your own as an artist, you know, like you in the emergency room battling to the death.
Yep. And
yeah, I think that ended their tour, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, so you're in skate shop.
Yep.
You're making hip hop stuff.
Yeah, I'm listening to that kind of stuff. I mean, I do not want to say that I was making hip hop because
well, you were young.
I was young, and I was just finding that rhythms were a good expression for me. Rhythms and low end were a really natural expression for me. And
right.
So
and now you're playing drums as your third,
trying to
fifth instrument. How many instruments do you play?
Oh man, I hate talking about it because it makes me sound conceited, but a lot of them. Yeah. Just because I'm a bored, depressed person, and instruments they fill that void really well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the whole reason this podcast exists.
I'm sure there are many of us.
Yeah. But you're from a musical family.
Yes, I am. My dad was a musician. My mom was not a musician, but very artistically inclined. She had very good taste and a very good 45 collection she passed on to me. So I had it kind of coming from both sides.
Tell me about your mom's record collection.
Man, she just had all the real singles, like not the hits that end up on the greatest hits compilation,
right? But
the shit that was like,
yeah, I mean, most of those bands were releasing a 7-inch every 6 weeks.
Yeah. So it's like
James Brown Band.
I've got some Conway Twitty singles.
No kidding.
That'll blow your mind. Seriously, like stuff that I use the term bop a lot when I'm producing. I'm like, this thing needs to bop. That's when I know it's going. You know,
yeah.
Dude, Conway Twitty bops on these singles.
Yeah,
seriously. Which I never thought I'd say. Truly, I'm not getting on Spotify and pulling up Conway Twitty.
No, it's not. But I mean, underrated.
Yeah.
A lot of that 60s country stuff, and especially the 70s when there was a lot of almost R&B crossover with
the rhythm section seemed to be coming from different schools. Yeah.
Well, I think that disco kind of killed funk in a lot of ways, and a lot of those musicians kind of drifted over into playing in Nashville where they could make a living. You know?
And where there was a little bit of blues, I think, left.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of that period of Nashville. We've already talked about Neil Young a little bit, but there's definitely a period of time where I went down the Harvest rabbit hole for a very long time, and listened to nothing but Harvest in the middle of dealing with the divorce. But yeah, it's not about my bummer, though. This is about your bummer.
Hey, my bummer's sounds pretty similar to your bummer, though. So, I'm curious how many divorces Harvest has been a part of.
Who knows? At least one that we know of that was Neil's. I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but that was a divorce record.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's why it serves itself so well.
Yeah, it's a really brilliant document of that. Disgraced former comedian Louis C.K. has that great routine about getting divorced is like being stuck in a time machine into the future that moves in real time.
I've never heard that.
Oh man, it really
that
resonated with me.
Yeah, that's
waiting for life to start again.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The bubble is rough.
It's interesting.
Your parents got divorced.
Yeah, when I was very young, like 10 or 11.
Yeah,
old enough to know what was going on, but I think too young to fully understand the implications of what it was going to mean for my life and theirs.
I was 11 too.
Really?
My parents got divorced, yeah. And I was also artistic. My mom was an opera singer, and then my parents split up. And, it may be a skater. I think that we have maybe similar trajectories, just like 30 years apart or something.
This podcast might not actually be that illuminating. It's just two guys repeating that, like, yeah, me too.
Yeah, me too. This is our me too moment. Yeah. So, were you like an anxious kid? Did you have depression as a kid?
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember my mom telling me some dark stuff I used to say as like a 7 or 8 year old.
Let's have it. Do you remember any of it?
I still am very fascinated with death. Mm-hmm. Not in a way that I like it, in a way that I'm just why is it that there's this one thing that everybody's terrified of, but we all have to do it someday? So what's up with that?
Right.
Why is there this cultural fear of a thing that's inevitable? That seems silly to me, or fascinating. But yeah, I used to say stuff all the time about, like, I would ask my mom constantly when I was going to die, or when she was going to die, when were our grandparents going to die, and what was that going to be like? And it was interesting too, because growing up there was so much death in my family at the time. A lot of aunts and uncles and grandparents that died, like, within a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I had, my best friend got hit by a car when I was 14.
Oh, Jesus.
Just had a bunch of that kind of stuff. So I think in a lot of ways, I knew that I had two options as somebody who, I didn't know it at the time, but had a darker disposition. I could either let my experience with death dampen my reality more,
right,
or kind of see it in a weird, try to see it in some sort of weird, necessary light as a part of life to cope, I mean, it was either that, or I was just going to, as I'm sure many people who have struggled with suicidal thoughts, you kind of hit that point where you're just like, well, I'm not really afraid of the thing, and this whole this experience seems worse than just not.
Yeah.
So I think in a lot of ways, thinking about death constructively was an attempt to fight that other impulse,
right,
which was just to, like, get out completely.
When did you sort of first become aware of the concept of suicide?
I think around the same time my best friend got hit, like 13, 14.
So there was your emotional pain at that point was severe enough that you contemplated self-harm?
Yeah, and I think too that, like, just the hormonal cocktail of being a 14-year-old skater kid who's with divorced parents, and just like I was getting hit kind of from all sides, and I didn't have a very healthy school life. Like, the public school I went to was kind of dumb and backwards. And
where was this?
Henry County. I went to Union Grove High School.
What's the big city in Henry County?
McDonough.
Okay, man. So, yeah, south of Atlanta. Is that right?
Yeah, like 45 minutes south of Atlanta.
God, that's not really anywhere, is it?
No, it is not anywhere. That's
everybody
a great way
knows
to put
that's
it.
Nowhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys can't see because this isn't a visual thing, but
yeah,
we're doing some Neil Young puns here.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the thing. It's just like a dumb kind of.
So your best friend at that point, you're probably like super bonded because you two are all you have there. Your parents are divorced.
Yeah, I mean, like, skate park every day.
Right.
We all lived there. Like, me and all my friends at the time were just kind of this ragtag crew of kids that came from either weird home situations or absent home situations. And so, like, we all felt something when we would, go to the skate park and smoke some weed and listen to Iron Maiden or whatever.
When did you start smoking weed?
14. This is all 1 year of just kind of like a radical perception shift,
right,
as to what my life would look like, I guess, or how it could look if I went that way.
Was your buddy skating when he got hit by a car?
He was.
I killed him.
Mm-hmm.
That sucks.
Yeah, it was gnarly. It was a really, it's funny because I have such a hard time making it negative now that it's been 10 years. Like, I can't help but almost see it as this thing that I'm weirdly happy to have experienced because it would prepare me for much darker, much worse things later in life.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of going through that thing. And I don't know. I grew up very fast because of many traumatic events in my early childhood and more as like an adolescent. And in a lot of ways, I now am thankful for them.
Gratitude is a big part of my sort of program to fight depression, obsessive thinking, and bad behavior.
It's the thing that I think a conscious effort to step outside in the morning in the midst of the cloud of depression, which, I mean, I've been medicated for 6 months now, and I still wake up in a cloud sometimes. Like, it's just,
yeah, sure.
I will never not be depressed. I have to make sure I know that.
Right.
But instead of letting it dictate my life, I can just say, I woke up in a cloud today and I stepped outside and I chose to be thankful for the sunshine or the rain.
Right.
Or the fact that I have a job, or the fact that I don't have a job and I have free time. Finding that piece of just like, well, sure, I might feel like shit on the inside, but it truly isn't about me. I am not the only person on this planet.
Right.
Not only going through that, but just in this experience.
Right.
So it's, and I'm not saying this for people out there that are depressed, but for me, my depression manifested in kind of a gnarly narcissism.
Okay.
Because it was a very insular experience. It was about me. It was about the way I saw the world.
Uh-huh.
And once I was able to put that together, because I don't want to be a narcissistic person, it kind of made the path towards mental health. Like I was able to shift the objective.
Right. Well, so the discussion that I had with someone recently in one of these interviews was there's a big difference between having a will to live and being happy.
Oh, absolutely.
And that sometimes just wanting to just to make the next day, make it to the next day is as important as trying to be happy, because sometimes happy is too much.
I think happy absolutely is too much when you're in the process of healing your mind from,
Trauma.
I think trauma, and it's an illness.
Yes.
I think really, there's just a lot of misunderstanding around mental health. And I think that for a lot of younger people, especially creative people, your mental health is so wrapped up in your process, and it's so wrapped up in the reason why you even do the thing you do. And to be in a culture that is even unsure or is unable to validate you in that way, I think you just have to start by being like, I am a sick person. Like, would you tell a diabetic not to take their insulin? Right. Would you ever do that? No. Why would you tell a depressed person that they shouldn't be on medication?
I think that there was like a sort of, historically for musicians, there was this validation of being able to make a living because people would buy vinyl albums and then CDs and so that's kind of fallen away. It's much harder to sell your product now because so much of it's available for streaming.
You can't make any money, so there's no social monetary gratification anymore. You got to find it somewhere else.
Well, the gratification and validation are the important part of this for me, because like making a living, it's possible to do that. It's a little more difficult than it used to be, but like part of what drove my generation of rockers to like try to throw themselves up a pop chart was this idea that I'll be rich and famous and it will validate my sense of self and make me feel less useless.
Or my dad might like what I do now. He might finally accept that I did something because whatever,
Right. And so there's so many things wrong with that assumption.
Of course.
I mean, a multitude of them, but one thing you can just take off the table now is that it's very unlikely that if you do anything unique and interesting and unusual, that it's going to make any money.
Oh, of course not. Well, because it's
at least not as selling a product. You can do live shows and make a living.
Yeah, I mean, there's I think that the discussion between like art and commerce used to be more intimately linked because there were physical products to sell.
Right.
Like you were never buying Harvest; you were buying a piece of wax that had Harvest on it.
Right.
Harvest is not worth $15. Or whatever, you know what I mean? That piece of wax and that packaging and the shipping that it took to get there, and whatever the record company's going to, or the record store is going to take off the top. That's why it costs that much.
When you start looking at how things were marked up too, it's insane.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Like so again, like I think that a lot of people seem shocked that now that music is invisible, that it doesn't have monetary value, and it's kind of like, well, we never decided that it had monetary value to begin with. We were always selling the physical manifestation of it. So in a lot of ways, I think that if we just move our goalpost, like there's just accepting that there's not a product to sell. Yeah. And the music doesn't have any intrinsic monetary value because we haven't set that as a society. So how can I figure out how to take this thing I want people to experience and just package it in a way that they find valuable? Yeah. Even if it's a book, if it's a, you know what I mean? If it's like some...
I've seen some really intriguing things, especially coming out of this. There's some Americana acts in the Triangle in North Carolina that have been doing these like almost like photo albums with music attached.
Ooh, that's interesting.
They're really cool. I'll show you when we get off, when we're done with this. But a buddy of mine played drums on a couple. And sadly, I can't recall the artist's name right now. But yeah, it was a whole like... a book of photographs that had been shot by a really great photographer, and then some poetry, and it was all one big here's a CD,
here's an experience,
right? Yeah, and it was really beautiful and cool. But I think that like a lot of us went through our early careers of sort of Generation X guys thinking that if we could get a record deal and sell a million records, it would validate us as human beings. And the mistake was that we thought that the art we were making was how we were going to be judged. But in reality, we had to get everything lined up to the point where someone could say, I could sell a lot of these.
That's all, yeah.
And that's all that really mattered to them.
Of course.
And so a lot of us were the bug that hit that windshield, and it destroyed a lot of lives.
Yeah, I think that when you have this, I think any time that you are seeking an external means for validation, you're setting yourself up for failure
and disappointment.
You're going to be let down because we live in an imperfect world. Mm-hmm. It's okay that it's imperfect. We can be frustrated about it. I mean, imperfection is what drives us to make it better.
Right.
So, but yeah, it's never going to live up to your expectation. You know, let's say you get your record deal and you sell 1 million copies. Great. Now your workload is insane, dude. Do you even want to do this anymore? Right. And also, do you want to sell 1 million records? Are you sure? Because like you like playing with your band in the South and touring around and eating Taco Bell. Right. Like that's not going to be a thing anymore or whatever. You know, like,
and also like the sort of active touring changes. Like I've been on a couple of bus tours now, and it's not the same. You don't get to go to the weird little used bookstore or the guitar store or the taqueria. Like there's food on the bus, there's food at the venue. Yeah. There's coffee at the venue. It sucks, but you're never really out of that loop because you don't get to jump on the bus and go, hey, Yelp says there's a great coffee shop. Oh no, we're driving to Cleveland. Yeah. You know, like the driver needs to drive through the night and we're getting so van touring is really kind of where that's my sweet spot.
Well, there's a camaraderie that I think there are all these other parts of the process that are really what we love about it, and we just aren't aware. So you're like, you know, it's interesting. I have seen this in the way people talk specifically about the Beatles less as a band and more as like a cultural institution at the time. Right. That what was infectious about them was actually the way they portrayed themselves to media, was because they didn't play along with Ed Sullivan, or they didn't play along with the interview. They were asked questions, they answered honestly. Mm-hmm. If they didn't know, they didn't know. Right. Their sense of humor was always very much so on display, and I think that was like for a lot of people, it's the first time in pop culture. Are you going to get a haircut
while you're in the United States? Yeah. Well, I just got one. You know,
yeah, got the long it's hair. Just like So like you know, I think that the fact that people had something deeper to connect with them other than their music is why when they started stepping out and growing their brand and growing the concept of what it means to be like a social entity that is a band or a project, everybody went along with them. They went on the ride because they saw them when they were just like young, dumb, and funny kids that are just like, what? We're in America? This is crazy. Like, you know, like that you can trust somebody then. Right. And when they say, we're doing this experience now. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh, I feel like I kind of know these guys. Right. There's like a deeper connection there. And it's interesting because we, in a lot of ways, we're closer to that. We have Instagram, we have stories, we have all these ways to like get in it. But it's not, I think people are missing out that I don't want to see you fabricating an experience that fits your lifestyle I assume you have. Right. I want to see you as an artist making your thing. Yeah. Maybe talking about it, but honestly, more so talking about your life and how it got there. Right. And being candid. Yeah. That's what makes me trust an artist. You know what I mean?
I think, though, also that creates a situation where the artist doesn't necessarily have, like, people have way too much access to their inner life. And if they're famous enough, then their relationships become characterized by an inauthenticity of people who are befriending them out of some sort of ambitious thing.
Oh, yeah. Like, people are trying to use you up, I'm sure. Yeah. And, you know. But that's the artist's responsibility to
that's a lot to
give
put on someone, though.
It is, but again, it's like, do you want to sell 1 million records? These are the things to think about. Like,
and that can answer in a lot of situations is maybe I don't want to sell 1 million records.
I think realizing that for me, success is being in a band with people that I love and care about, getting to play music, and making things I'm proud of. Yeah. If I can start there, right, I don't give a shit what I sell.
No, it's true.
You know, just because like I've changed my expectations. Yeah. You know, if my expectation is to pay my rent playing music, then I would probably have to change the way I'm playing music right now. True. But I've decided I'll just get a job. Right. I'll figure out a way to make it float. That's the season of life I'm in now. Yep. And it's actually made making music a lot more fun. Yes. In a lot of ways.
Pressure's off.
Pressure's off.
Yeah. So it's not a long jump from like the death of your best friend at 14 to when I first met you, it's only 3-4 years.
Oh man, I was still in the thick of it by that. Like personally, kind of figuring stuff out.
There were no songs on that record about that event, though.
No. Those there are a few that came out on the first solo record I made. I did up in Nashville in like 2014, maybe.
Yeah, that's when you're being managed by the Driving and Crying guy.
Loosely, yeah. It was kind of like Ken Green has been a friend of mine forever and has worked with my dad on some stuff, and I have been hanging out with those Driving and Crying guys since I was a preteen.
When did you start guitar?
Well, actually, let me think about this. First instrument ever learned was cello. That was 6th grade.
Huh. That's 2 people in 2 days who come in to do interviews, and their first instrument was cello. Man,
you got some juju going on in here.
I'm just beginning to wonder if that cello causes depression.
It might. Yeah. It's a somber instrument.
It's a dark,
a very lamenting instrument for sure.
Yeah.
But that was my introduction. I was actually very into it too. I was like, I think at a young age had decided I wanted to play classical music. And
so how old is this?
What's 6th grade? Like
11.
Yeah, 12. And then I played that all the way through high school.
You still have a cello?
Oh yeah, still have the same one. I've been picking it up. I bought a new bow and a new tailpiece and some strings, and
that's like a $500 investment.
It's so much money. I think that's why I was putting it off for so long. Because I was like, I'm sorry, but an instrument that requires me to make a certain amount of money just to get off the ground.
Man, I play.
Get out of here.
The thing I do with Mike Mills, the violinist, is this guy Bobby McDuffie, or Robert McDuffie officially, but everybody calls him Bobby. His violin is insured for $11 million.
Yeah, man, I'm sorry, but like my guitar, I've never spent more than $300 on a guitar, So.
Well, this is it's not even a Stradivarius. It's even a little more exclusive than that.
Oh, even. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't remember who the maker is, but it's like, oh yeah, well I could have gotten a Stradivarius, but this is better.
Yeah.
And it's jointly owned by an investment company. Like a bunch of people threw down, they bought it for like $6 million, and then they'll eventually sell it for twice that or something. It's some crazy. It's nuts. It's bananas. Yeah. And he just throws it under restaurant tables,
Yeah, it's a high barrier to entry.
Yeah,
I think I started to realize that guitar probably came once I saw that the built-in cultural elitism of classical music.
Sure.
Which, let's just call it what it is, guys. Not a slam to the classical players out there, but maybe it's better now. I'm assuming
it's also a really narrow funnel.
It's a super narrow funnel, man. It's like, what are you going to do? You going to go play for the ASO? Probably not. Right. And then where else are you going to make a living?
I mean, one of the
Session
great
work,
things,
maybe.
Yeah, one of the great things about this thing with Mills is that I've gotten to play with some regional symphonies, because the whole thing is, it's an orchestral rock band thing. And so we played in Buffalo and Houston and Fort Lauderdale and Toronto and Aspen. And it's always been like, I mean, there is like a jobs program for classical players once you hit a certain level.
Like once you're in?
Yeah. Like you might end up being an artist in residence at, a university somewhere.
Interesting.
Or you might, there's a great ensemble that we traveled with from Chicago that were all classical players who had just hit a level where they were professional, truly virtuoso level players, but weren't ready to settle down with a symphony somewhere, so they were in this sort of group.
Interesting.
And, I mean, the work is out there, but... And also, there's also lessons. I mean,
Oh, yeah. I mean, the teaching avenue was probably what I had assumed would be my thing if I stayed with cello. Right.
But instead, you got a skateboard and electric guitar.
I got a skateboard and an electric guitar, and I started listening to Dinosaur Jr., and I was like, this is cool.
Yeah.
And I think that, everything up to that point was classic rock. It was old stuff. It was the Beatles, Neil Young, whatever. It was stuff my parents were giving me. Yeah, my mom's records and my dad playing me stuff. And then, it's like I get to an age where my brother can start giving me music and he's showing me Radiohead. Right. And then I'm like, oh.
Right.
And then I'm at the skate park and I'm finding shit like Dinosaur Jr. And I'm kind of like, I was really into Guided by Voices. I still am, but, hit that stuff hard, kind of this... whatever that 90s alternative, but
I was out there making it. So yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Dude, I had a first the other night. My band plays we try to play relatively quiet, just because everybody's loud.
That was the next wave, and it just hasn't come yet. Maybe it's finally happening.
Everybody's so loud. How are you going to get somebody's attention at a show unless you just get so much quieter?
One of the most effective things that Mike, the singer from 5/8, does is sometimes he sings off mic.
Yeah. Oh,
Like
yeah.
He palm mutes all the strings and steps in front of the monitors and sings off mic.
Force somebody to lean in and listen.
Right.
You know,
It
like
happens.
it
It works.
does. It works every time. I think it's so much more powerful if you can not command a room, but like pull a room in to you. I think that shows
Pull a room instead of pushing it.
Yeah, it's way more control as a
Right.
front man and a leader, I think, or as just as an ensemble. You know, I think especially just because I like to mix and produce and stuff, I'm trying to be more conscious of my ears. I do a bad job at it because
It's too late for me.
see, that's what I'm worried about.
Yeah.
You know,
I have
like-
to have a guy like Richard Salino who can
what a
hear
guy.
things. He's a superhero. I'm hoping we can talk sometime because, Richard is a cancer survivor now.
I know.
And-
I saw him. This was maybe a year or two ago. I was up in New York and I went and swung by Studio G to get some coffee and say hey, and he was telling me the whole thing. And I was
Dude's got
man.
golden ears though.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
Like when we were mixing your record, like he was my intern then, and he would be like, do you mind if I, and he would like ease in there and just
Yeah.
make it like 10 minutes later, it would sound infinitely better.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
was like, okay, this is my dude. you
Yeah.
know? And I started paying him after that because like I'm not letting that guy get
Yeah,
away.
of course. It's worth it. Money well spent.
So, you make this evolution from cellist to punk kid.
Yeah.
And somewhere in there though, you made this hard turn towards these sort of Beatlesque.
Yeah, I think that was always gonna be me.
Right.
Like that was always what was gonna come out.
Right.
Even though like I was putting in the Dead Kennedys, putting
Right.
in Bad Brains, I think probably at the height of being just like a skater kid, that was what I was into. It was, the classic stuff, Zeppelin, Sabbath, like all the old heavy shit, and
Right.
then just punk through and through. I was not listening to the Beatles and skating. I wasn't
Right.
listening to Blackbird while I was, but for
Although
whatever
that would
reason,
be an interesting pool session.
right?
Yeah.
I'm sure it would be kind of pleasant, actually.
Right, yeah.
Blackbird on the boombox.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for whatever reason, that just kept coming out. Like I would be listening to this really aggressive stuff, and then what would come out were these really like sweet, emotional, melodic.
Right.
Like, now I know it's just because I think that Paul McCartney is king to me, and he obviously got his
Is he
way
your
into my
favorite-
brain.
Is he your favorite Beatle?
Yeah, he's the one, man. Listen to the melodies. You just can't fight it.
No,
and
and Paul is great. Temperamentally, John is probably my favorite Beatle because he was a really fucked up guy with some mother issues, and that it resonates. But musically, man, Ringo's my dude.
Oh well, hey, from the beginning,
Yeah,
the fact that you were Don't Fear the Ringo, I was like, this guy
that's my.
gets it.
That's my.
This guy understands.
Don't Fear the Ringo, for people who don't know what the hell he's talking about, is my internet. Like, if I start a new account on a forum or on a social media app, Don't Fear the Ringo is my go-to tag.
Because don't fear it. It's the move always.
Right. So you came to the studio where I was working. I don't remember how I even got that session.
Jordan Tumlin saw
Yeah.
Easter. I know this whole story.
Oh yeah.
Jordan Tumlin saw Easter Island open for Lear Lynn at the Georgia Theater, who, by a turn of happenstance, many years later, I would go on a tour with Lear Lynn. And
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, I toured with
Yeah.
her maybe 2 years ago. I know her bass player really well.
Uh-huh.
He's from Atlanta. And so, yeah, just he saw you guys. I think the way he framed it is he just like met you out back. You were loading your drums into your Subaru,
Yeah.
the white Subaru.
Oh man, that thing got 495,000 miles on it, and then it literally caught on fire.
Many a mix referenced.
Oh yeah,
in
that's
that
right. We used to
Subaru,
listen
man.
to mixes in that
Yeah.
record. Yeah, we used to ride around in that car and listen to mixes. I've forgotten.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna have another one day.
That's the car, man.
Yeah, it's the perfect to load drums into, and then or drive an entire band around, and the Outback was like perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was, I think he came up to you, introduced himself, and he was like, I'm in a band. How much would it, I think he literally was like, how much money do you want
Right.
to help us finish this record? And you were like, I don't know, like $800. It was something that we were just like, done. You
Right.
know? Like, we'll do it.
I was like, I should ask for more money.
Yeah.
So this whole time you're writing songs, you're making music. Your dad's not really present in your life at that time, right?
He is, but it's very transient. We had a very...
Because he's a performer.
He's a performer.
This is something that I worry about every day because I'm a dad and a performer, and
Yeah.
it's tough.
It was tough. It was hard. I think after him and my mom split, he was really trying to find himself.
Uh-huh.
And, because he was out on the road all the time, like him and my mom didn't really argue over custody. It was just like yeah, I'm going to live with my mom because you're gone all the time.
Right.
And then when he was in town, I'd go stay at his apartment. And I think that we, in a lot of ways, were so similar that made it hard to connect. We both do the same thing. We both express ourselves using a similar art form. We both have done it in the same city. So like being a young kid and seeing him doing what I kind of wanted to do, but then also feeling like he wasn't as accessible as maybe, like, you know, what a cool feeling for your dad to be doing something you want to do and to have access to that. But in a lot of weird ways, I felt like I still didn't all the way have access. And so, you know, when we would spend time together, it was hard for me to feel the like father-son connection point. And it was more so like, this is kind of like a guy that I admire that does this stuff that I also want to do.
Right.
And that was kind of like as far as I could feel it.
Now, when we were working on the records that we worked on, you had a lot of knowledge about how studios work. Is that stuff he taught you, or was that you digging in and trying to learn it on your own?
Both.
Yeah.
He opened that door for me at a very young age. We always had a studio in the house. And when my parents split, he had a studio in his apartment. And, you know, so I learned, you know, I knew that a 414 into an LA 610 sounded good by 15. I knew what that chain was, and I understood what it was doing. So I think like having that kind of tangible, I could touch the stuff and say, this is what a $300 mic sounds like, and this is what a $1,400 mic sounds like. This is what, you know, a shitty M-Box sounds like, and this is what an LA 610 sounds like. That made sense to me.
So you guys had tracked everything on that Mr. Mustache record with one microphone, though, right? Which was bananas, because when we were mixing it sounded amazing.
It was the
we did reamp a few guitars because we had direct signal.
Well, you guys also had an AC30.
We had a 1962 AC30 with the high end boost.
With the stand, man.
Man, it was bad, and the cover, like it was crazy.
Yeah,
reamping things through the amp was a real joy.
It really was.
But it was hidden in the control room. If you didn't know it was there, you didn't know it was there.
What a shame.
Insane.
What a shame.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, that we used like I think it was the Sterling Audio ST55 for you gear nerds out there.
Yeah.
It's like $150 mic. Yeah. You know? This is literally the cheapest mic I could get at Guitar Center when I was like 16, 17.
So do you feel like by trying to make the best pop records that you could, you were in some way trying to get some validation from your dad?
100%.
Yeah.
My dad's like one of the most talented pop writers and like vocal performers ever.
Yeah.
You know? And that's coming from someone who's had a hard time finding validation and connection with him, and objectively I can still recognize just the undeniable talent that he has.
Sure.
So I think in a lot of ways there was this desire to have something to show that said like, look, you taught me something,
right?
And I did something with it. But I think it never quite happened the way that I had envisioned in my head time and time again, which is why I think after a while I politely accepted within myself that like these two things might be separate, and maybe my validation needs to come from me and how I feel about this art, not necessarily like seeking the respect or approval of him, or honestly other older artists and stuff in my life. That was all kind of wrapped up in one big trip for me.
Well, you knew I was a big fan.
Well, honestly, like I think I tell people all the time that you kind of served as this musical and social mentor for me. Yeah, absolutely. At that time in my life, because I was, you know, I had so many questions.
Yeah.
And not really an older male figure in my life to answer them. Or not to answer them in a way that I felt like was going to be as objective and honest as you had presented from day one. You were like, I'm going to tell you if I hate it. I'm going to tell you if I love it. And I was like, this is great.
Well, I mean, telling someone that you don't like something that they've done sometimes is a profound act of love, as painful as it might be.
Oh, man, I think that telling people honestly how you feel about something they're either doing or making is the truest way you can love them, because it says that I know what I could expect of you, and this is not it. Yeah. And that's actually a compliment to me in a lot of ways. Like,
I had high standards for you and everybody in that band because you showed such promise walking in the door. You know, like that record was fully realized, and I still listen to it. My daughter loved it, and she was 3. And when she connected with it on the first record she loved was that Mr. Mustache record.
Man, that is
pretty wild.
I really wish you knew what that made me feel on the inside. 'Cause that's special, man. That's
and like you guys taught me a few things too. Like at the time, there was this huge push in indie rock and especially indie folk. Like, there's no such thing as too much reverb.
Yeah.
And I was not on board with that initially. Yeah. And then we were working on the chorus for that one song, Brienne, I think it's called.
Yeah, that's super, super big.
And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to show these guys how dumb this sounds. And I just took the proverbial bucket of reverb and laid it on there. And then we all listened to it and it was like, oh, that's perfect. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to pretend I meant to do this.
Man, it's funny because in a lot of ways, now looking back, I kind of agree with you. I am less on the verb train.
Well, I just feel like, in a way, like if you know the nuts and bolts of recording, you're like, well, they're trying to make this sound really grand.
Sure.
And if you listen to a lot of the stuff that I really love, like our 60s R&B and Afrobeat, it's really immediate and dry and right in your face.
Yeah, everything is in the middle and in
because when you have like a 14-piece Afrobeat orchestra,
it's the only way you can do it.
You got to put a little reverb on the horns and a little room around the drums, and everything else has to be dry, or you're going to sound like you're down in a well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But more moving pieces.
But I did go forward with this sort of band of horses approach to reverb after that. Like, okay, well, let's just try a huge amount of it first, and then we'll take it away.
Yeah.
And it definitely changed the way I approach mixing. But and then not too long, so that band kind of hit the first hurdle and buried its chin in the dirt, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But I think that had a lot to do less with the quality of the music and just the guy. In fact, you guys were all so young and all kind of moving in different directions.
And all, to be honest, all of us going through our own mental health struggles in our own rights. I mean, I think all of us were trying to make sense of an ever increasingly confusing and discombobulated world.
Yes.
Especially, I mean, not just sociopolitically, but even just within like growing up and being an artist. Growing up and being an artist in a weird postmodern age where art isn't the centrifuge of like the public square anymore.
Right.
It used to be that like if you had something to say, you would hear from everybody. You'd hear from the politician, you'd hear from the spiritual leader, you'd hear from the writer. It was like,
Well, there was only 3 channels on the TV when I was growing up.
Yeah. So it's like
literally 3 channels, and you had to get up and cross the room to turn it off. So
yeah.
If
you think about, it seems crazy to me that I don't feel like there will ever be another times they're changing. I mean, let me rephrase that. I think that Kendrick Lamar's All Right was that.
Right.
I think that served the exact same and equally as socially relevant and important role as a song like Times Are A-Changin'. But when you look at the immediacy of somebody like Dylan being able to do that in a time where the world was literally changing, like at a pace that it never had before previous to then, and then that entire movement has a song, like that doesn't happen anymore.
Well, the next wave comes so fast now.
Yeah.
Like
the cycle is just far too quick, and you're outraged by one terrible injustice in the world, and hours later you have to ditch that one because it's not truly as bad as this horrible thing going on. And you feel, you're just like, we're constantly bombarded with information to make us feel like it's not worth being in this reality.
Yeah.
And I think that like,
it's pretty anxiety inducing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, like, dude, it makes so much sense why kids my age and younger and even some older than me are just debilitated by the anxiety they feel, especially again creative people, because I think if you're a creative person, you have a hypersensitivity to emotional experience, which is why you want to harness all of that and make something out of it.
I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole with this, but my theory is that sensitivity is born out of you have it naturally as a kid. Every kid gets upset at loud noises.
Absolutely.
Every small child. And that's just an evolutionary thing, right? You had to be sort of aware of the barometric pressure of the emotional tenor of a room because there were times, where you might get hurt because, our evolutionary ancestors biologically were less sort of withheld by societal structure, and sometimes, there was violence. And
absolutely.
So we had this innate sensitivity to the emotional tenor of everyone else in the room. And I think we're born with that, but we outgrow it if we have a stable situation.
Of course, because stability removes the need for like alertness.
Hyper-awareness, hypervigilance, they call it. And it becomes a vestigial emotion. But if we don't ever have that security, that sensitivity remains kind of dialed up to 11.
And I think it's both a blessing and a curse in a lot of ways, because to be a very emotional person and a very intuitive person is very, like, now that I've learned to control it more and use it as a tool as opposed to like it no longer drives the ship, right? Like it used to be
like? I don't know.
Man, to be honest, like it even though I'm in a place mentally where I'm less concerned with the semantics, having a spiritual practice in my life has done it. Yeah. Because it allows me to take my trip, put it somewhere on a metaphysical shelf almost, where
I get through the day. Yeah.
And it's insane how helpful that's been.
I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I don't want to lose that thread either.
You
told me you're doing yoga.
Yeah, I mean, my practice is so wrapped up in my mental health and what has been my process of healing from the trauma in my life, and also like moving forward with depression and anxiety. Right. Because the brand of depression I was diagnosed with was it's a pretty aggressive manic depression. So the mania that comes with it, is oftentimes what induces the panic attack or induces the dip down into the pit. So in a lot of ways, like, the medication isn't the only piece, because the medication helps my serotonin levels and my dopamine levels, and that's great because that helps me wake up in the morning without the shadowy corners in my eyes. Sure. Right? Right. That doesn't help me when Donald Trump says something horrible and I see, or, you know what I mean? Like, it just, when life hits me, the medication, it only takes care of the serotonin. Right. That's all it's supposed to do. Right. So I think, like, having this other piece that was like, it's equally as important for me to be medicated and listen to my doctor, as well as to kind of look at this lesser seen and known part of myself, which is like, the only way I've been able to describe people is like through yoga, meditation. I was raised Catholic, so I pray the rosary pretty faithfully.
Yeah, my wife's a recovering Catholic.
It's a struggle. Yeah. Especially now. I mean, like I think before the more recent round of sexual abuse scandal, I was starting to become more comfortable with identifying as somebody with a Catholic belief. But now,
this Pope is great.
I'm a little disappointed though with the way he's responded to this stuff. I think it's going to take Catholics standing up and saying, you know what, like,
maybe this hierarchical thing isn't so great.
Well, this should just be empirical. Right. There should be no debate over whether or there should be no debate about whether or not these men should be excommunicated and whether or not they should be held accountable.
Go to fucking jail.
Yeah, they need to they need to be imprisoned because we're not allowed to do those things as people that aren't a part of the Vatican. Right. So, like, I don't know. Right. It's just
allowed I don't even think that's.
Yeah. So,
but I'm always been like, as far as I've ever really dug deep into Catholicism has been the liberation theologists of Latin America.
Oh, absolutely.
Those are my dudes.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. I mean, liberation theology, I think, it's funny. I was just listening to a Richard Rohr podcast on the way up here, trying to get in my head, and he's a Franciscan thinker that, his life was like revolutionized by liberation theology. And he said a quote that I thought was incredible. He said, if you read the Bible and the whole thing isn't liberation theology to you, you're not reading the right one. Right. And it's like, man, that's a ballsy thing to say. Yeah. And I think, again, that's why, for me, I try to connect with, like, it was the language I was given as a kid, man. Sure. So if you're trying to teach me some sort of, like, esoteric truth about the world, chances are it's going to make the most sense to me through that thing because I just know it. Right. It doesn't mean that I think it's empirically true or that I think it is, like, an isolated truth. Right. It's just that it's the vehicle that I trust when it's pulling down the driveway. Right.
So you married young.
I did. I married very young.
And it seems like it's just in the dissolution of that original band that was doing pretty well artistically. but then was fracturing. Were you trying to sort of create a family? Like
I was
a pocket of serenity and
I was
stability?
looking for a sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that at the time, I was a part of a very charismatic Christian gathering, which was very good for me and very bad for me in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's good for me because it showed me that a person with my disposition was welcome in a spiritual gathering.
Right.
But also it was very unchecked.
There's a lot of pressure in that environment to marry up and baby up and
settle down quick and
right.
kind of like establish your roots because you will be a better, I don't know, because I guess in a lot of ways socially you're seen as more trustworthy. I was in a role of leadership at the time, and so I think there was a lot of that pressure built up into my head of just like people will take me more serious if I'm married or whatever, you know.
How long did you guys date before you got married?
6 months.
Oh, gosh.
Classic Christian marriage, dude.
Whew.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, dude, not a wise move.
It's taken me 6 months in a marriage to ask for something, like different in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Like, maybe I don't want to be responsible for these bills, 6 months minimum,
Dude, it's the filling the void game will take you on some wild trips. And
no doubt.
Right?
Yeah.
So like, I don't know. I mean, I don't claim to have any amount of self-awareness that like makes me be like, I know why I needed to do that and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I just know that, I'm thankful and again, back on the grateful thing. It's like I've had all these experiences, getting married super young, getting divorced. Like, it sucks. It's hard to look back and feel like you almost made a mistake in a lot of ways.
Yeah, divorce is big for moments of lying in bed thinking,
what's going on? Like,
why did I do these things that I did? Yeah.
But I can also look back and see in a lot of ways how it's like every time in my life, and this kind of goes back to why the spiritual thing keeps me grounded as a person with mental illness, is that like every time in my life I've tried to put my judgment ahead of my either intuition or ahead of my, like, we all have that weird deep thing that it's that.
Have you read The Gift of Fear?
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Have you read The Fantasy Bond?
No. What is that?
It's a very it's something I talk about a lot with friends and sometimes on this podcast. It's a book about people who had absentee parents building an idealized relationship with a parent that didn't exist in their lives, and they sort of create this imaginary parent.
Yeah.
And they take that coping skill forward into their marriages or relationships, and they build up this person that they've fallen in love with into this idealized version of them. And it's not fair to that person, and it's certainly not fair to yourself, because eventually, like, the real person is going to poke through, and it's like I've done it over and over.
Dude, I mean, again, outside validation, you're set up for failure.
Yeah.
It's just like, I think that, anytime I set out to say, if I do X, then Y, right? It's almost always I'm going to realize that hole is going to be just as empty as when I started.
I don't feel like The Fantasy Bond is a great book. It's a great
concept,
theory. It's written by a very sort of very dry, theoretical academic writer.
Yeah,
but it's if you can just read it for what it is and understand it, and then sort of learn to.
Dude, I love that kind of stuff because I'm definitely like a little Carl Jungian freak, and I love reading that shit.
I'm an anecdotal learner.
Yeah, I just need I need a tidbit of wisdom to chew on,
right,
and then move on to the next thing.
So your marriage fell apart.
Yeah,
yeah. And it threw you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I had been having panic attacks again maybe 2 years into the marriage.
Okay.
And I was like, yo, it's been a minute, since one of these. So what's going on? No,
you weren't taking meds then? Mm-mm. No, and not working any kind of practice other than going to churchy church.
Yeah, I had a church job.
Yeah.
My transition from being like a really charismatic young Christian kid who also my living was wrapped up in that, which was a big mistake.
Yeah.
Not saying people shouldn't do that. For me personally, it was a mistake.
Right.
So when as I was drifting away from kind of having a faith at the center of my life, but I was still showing up every Sunday, and I hit a point where I knew I was pretending, and that's when I had to stop.
Right.
Because I was like, you know what? I'm doing these people a disservice by standing up here and telling them I'm with them, I'm their champion, and I believe these things when I know I don't. And I shouldn't do that for them, you know?
You start having panic attacks. Your marriage is still, as far as you know, everyone's being faithful. But you begin to lose your faith in, or having some doubts about your religion at this point?
I mean, we both of us were kind of starting to question a lot of things. And I had always, I grew up Catholic. Mm-hmm. My entire teenage stint, didn't believe in anything.
Yes.
And then rediscovered a faith in a very charismatic, kind of like emotionally amped up way.
Right.
Which again, I'm a very emotional person. It perfect storm, you know?
Yeah, I haven't really been involved in any evangelical or charismatic. I've sort of walked away from the church when I was very young and never gone back.
Yeah.
But my understanding is that there's a lot of sort of whipping everybody into a bit of a frenzy.
Yeah, it's definitely, there's, looking back, I can definitely mark, I wonder how many times I'm saying definitely. This is like one of those.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't.
I'm going to get stuck in a trip.
Yeah, don't. Don't. I don't know what to do with my hands.
Yeah, is
right?
this okay?
Yeah.
There's so much that happens in a room with a bunch of people singing about something so big as like a spiritual idea or a truth or a faith, right?
Yeah.
So there's this element that I think is very real that happens in the same way that every band you've ever been in, that you're doing it, when it locks and you're like, we are in this thing.
Yes.
You feel like you're breathing together. You feel like you're moving together. You feel like your hearts are beating in sync. It's like this very connecting thing.
But part of the sort of atomic nature of capitalism is that we're all isolated.
Of course.
Until we have these moments. And then people are...
They're starved
starving
for it, man. They're
yeah.
starved. Absolutely. So it's like, of course you get in this room and, anybody who hasn't experienced it, go anywhere where 200 people are singing the same melody and lyrics, and you're going to feel something because you're surrounded by this loud, vibrating in your chest thing.
Right.
So I think step one, that is in itself a spiritual experience, regardless of what the song's about, regardless of what the thing is. It's like drumming, it's like dancing, like you're connecting to something deeper and less tangible than just your physical understanding of reality.
Just feeding your needs.
You're feeding your needs.
I mean, you're more than just like feeding your desires as like go to IKEA, go to
That's
Target.
base level stuff.
Right. But
that's
this is
ego
something
stuff.
much
This
more
this
profound.
This is like, your ancestors, however many thousands of years ago, danced around drums because it induced this experience.
Right.
And I think that we've lost the meaning of the experience and replaced it with what we believe to be the appropriate way to express it, which is why, and this is just my theory from working in churches for a very long time, it's kind of why we put these people up on a stage. Got to make sure they're the best dressed people in the congregation. Got to make sure that they're the most equipped socially to lead, which again leads back to like healthy family, healthy kids, right? Everything's just got to be in place.
Right.
And once everything's in place, we then take these people and we trust them as the sole provider of the experience to graciously give it to us, the humble congregation.
The moral lighthouse.
Dude, my understanding of Christianity is that it's a it's a priesthood of common believers. That was the whole radical message, right? It's like there is no high priest anymore.
Very anti-hierarchical.
Everybody is the priest.
Right.
And it's going to be a communal effort to come together, deal with life in a way where we share what we have.
Right.
And try to cope and ease the suffering of the world by offering an alternative that doesn't require power structures.
Right.
But
that's a lot of responsibility.
That's a lot of responsibility, and people don't want that because I think a lot of people are like, but I could just go and that guy could tell me what to do.
Right.
And then I don't have to think about it as much.
Yeah.
/ ever.
Right.
And
so you're in this role.
I was in this role.
And you're doubting
everything. I'm having I tell people now that like my atheism is just as much a part of my spiritual belief as my theism is.
Yes.
Whereas before they used to be like these dichotomies, and it'd be like, I feel atheist again, or I'm super into the God thing. And it's now I'm just like, I let them both dance with each other, because that's just, one, it's how my brain is. I should stop fighting it. And two, the days where I wake up and I don't feel that a God exists, those are the days where I honestly see how my practice has helped me so much, and it kind of like draws me back.
Right.
The days when I wake up and I'm like, all right, well, the world's shit, so clearly this is a lie.
Right.
Right. Then I'll step outside and see my neighbor's new kid, and I'm like, I don't know though, man. Like, it's easier to be this cynical asshole.
Right.
And I kind of don't like that it's cool to be that right now.
Right.
To me, it's like way cooler to be soft and open and, have a very...
the audacity of hope.
Yeah.
That's
seriously,
one of the greatest book titles of all time.
It's incredible.
I mean, I'm glad that I never got drone striked by that president, but
yeah, seriously.
But I really think that it is fairly audacious to want more. But I mean, the big socialist motto, "A better world is possible."
Yeah,
I believe it is.
It is too, and I think to tie it back into this, your mental health, and kind of like if you're out there dealing with depression, all this stuff is saying that within you already exists this capacity to make your internal dialogue and world experience better.
More positive. Yeah.
And there are all these tools to help you, like medication, like psychiatry, like therapy. But ultimately, as with anything, it has to take an internal root. You have to believe that you can get better.
Right.
You have to believe. And if you don't have people in your life that are encouraging you in this, you have to find new people or get rid of those people. Like, this is like your well-being
or try
that
to
we're
lead.
Concerned with. Or try to lead by example, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, as one of the things I hate the most about depression as an illness, and why I think it's horrible, is that it's an illness that convinces you you're bad for having it.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck is that?
That's one of my favorite comedian lines was, alcoholism is the only disease that people yell at you for having.
Yeah, like...
But, I think that maybe that guy missed the boat about depression.
Because
but the person who's yelling at you the most is you.
Is you.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you how many nights I spent on, just really contemplating whether or not I was going to finally do the big thing, and it was all wrapped up in, like, I have this illness that I didn't have a say in, and I feel like it has made me, like, I am predispositioned to now be a bad person.
Yeah.
Like, I hated myself for being depressed, and then I would hate myself for hating myself.
Yeah.
Right?
And I've seen
feedback loops.
I've seen some people in the throes of depression take extreme steps to try to alleviate the suffering by trying some behavior to fill the hole, and now you've got guilt.
Of course.
On top of
course.
Of the already self-loathing you have because your dopamine levels are cripplingly low. And
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, man, I hit,
So on that, with that in mind, like, do you feel like that this sort of disillusion with your position in this charismatic fundamentalist church is part of what caused your marriage to fail?
I think that a big part of it was that both of us realized the predicated foundation that this marriage was built on was no longer there.
Right.
So connection was going to have to kind of start over.
And so you get this now what moment?
Yeah, it was like a now what. And I think once we both realized, it took maybe 2 years of that before it was just like, dude, this isn't it. Like, we connected there,
right,
and that thing held us together. But without that, we're actually two pretty incompatible people,
right,
with what we want in the world, how we're changing, how, I think my reaction was to lean in further when I started to get confused,
right,
whereas my partner's was to lean out. And again, nobody's right or wrong, but if you're going in two different directions,
well, it sounds like the fantasy bond was broken.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What the thing was understood to be, or what it was hoped to be,
right,
could not be. So, it took 2 years of a lot of pain and depression on my end, just trying to figure out what, feeling guilty for everything, trying to figure out how to solve it. But then also, the relationship wasn't helpful in that, because neither of us understood mental health enough to be able to know how to move forward. She had never experienced anybody really with depression in her life.
Yeah.
And it had been, I hadn't felt the way I felt 2 years ago since I did when I was like, my friend died and I was like really young.
Yeah.
So I'd always chalk that up to, again, the hormonal cocktail of just like, I was super moody and dramatic and wanted to kill myself all 14 to 18, you know, just like feeling it all the time.
Right.
And writing suicide letters and throwing them away in the morning, just like so much shit. And once I'd convinced myself that like, oh, I'm through that, I'm past that, then it starts coming up again. I'm like an adult with like actual responsibilities and I'm trying to make a career for, you know, it's just like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Why do I want to do this now again? You know?
Yeah.
So that threw me for a loop.
And as a partner, she wasn't really prepared to support you through that.
No. And I mean, again, like,
so she eventually made a decision to hit the ultimate eject button in a relationship, which was to be unfaithful.
I mean, it's hard to say what happened because answers aren't clear.
Yeah.
But I knew that by the end of it, there was somebody else already in place.
I only bring up the infidelity not because I want to demonize this former partner, but because that puts a unique spin on the depression that you fall into as feeling someone who's been rejected in a marriage.
Absolutely. And the abandonment issues with my father and you know, and even to take it on a bigger kind of deeper thing, I felt really abandoned by God. Truly.
Yeah.
The God that I didn't believe in.
I've never trusted that guy, so
right?
I don't really know what that's like.
See what's crazy is that like it's such a heavy trip, man, when there's this thing. Like, I was raised in a pretty spiritual environment. So I know that a lot of it just comes from that. I know that a lot of it comes from like it's a language I feel comfortable speaking with because I've been around it.
Sure.
It's shifted for me in what it means because now I look at it like I look at anything else. I'm not really concerned whether or not it's like factually true.
Right.
I just know that my brain is happier and I'm a better person when I do these things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's as far as I let it go.
Yeah.
And maybe one day through this practice, I will find some deep intrinsic truth, but I'm not searching for it. Because to me, the truth is that it's like I do my practice. I make a conscious effort to be loving and kind like the great teachers before me have done.
Uh-huh.
And if I do that, my life is better. I'm happier. The people around me are happier. I'm more at peace with my situation, whether that means I'm broke or I'm killing it or whatever.
Right.
It keeps me grounded. I think by the time I started to feel, you know, like I didn't know who that person was inside me that felt that way anymore. That was when the depression really was like, dude, you don't even have like a deeper existential truth you believe about yourself anymore. Like that's gone now too.
Uh-huh.
I felt like a shell completely.
Yeah.
You know, I would wake up every morning and look in the mirror and I did not know who I was looking at. It was a very psychedelic experience.
Yeah.
Seriously, for a really long time, I would just wake up in the mornings and look in the mirror and I was just like, I feel fucked up. Like I feel torn on the inside, you know? Mm-hmm. And I would remember having panic attacks and feeling like there were literally two things tugging at my heart, like trying to get me to do two different things.
So at this point in your life, you're living alone or in a group house? I remember you were in a group house at one point.
I'm in a group house now. I have been since the divorce. So,
but you got your own room.
Yeah, I've got my own spot. Yeah.
You don't have a job?
No. I was working at I had a job. I was working at like a wood shop, making $10 an hour, working 6 hours a day or whatever.
Yeah.
Just like making cutting boards and.
So you're living in your room and you've got a manual job that's not really challenging you emotionally, and you've kind of fallen into this 40 days in the desert thing.
Oh yeah, man! It was a dark night of the soul every night for sure.
I've been there. I've had that period of time where I was living alone and reeling from a rejection, and sometimes would go days at a time without speaking to another human being. You know,
I was thankful to be in a roommate situation to kind of force me to have social camaraderie,
interaction,
talk about what I was going through.
So you were talking about it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm very grateful to have some very emotionally intelligent friends in my life that are just kind of like, hey, what's going on? How you doing? Talk to me.
A lot of people who sort of wander away from that charismatic situation that you were in are often very emotionally intelligent people.
Yeah,
those Easter Island guys are all really sharp.
Dude, they're very sharp. I mean, again, one of the benefits of any kind of, if it's healthy, any kind of spiritual gathering is that the goal really is to learn how to hear one another well.
Yeah,
that's the goal of being a community. is, hey, you come tell me what's going on. I'm really going to listen, and then I'm going to formulate a response that's in line with the code of ethics we all agree upon.
Right.
And that can be really healthy, I think, when done correctly.
Right.
So
as long as it doesn't get perverted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or just, man, we get in the way so much.
So is this like a bottom? Like, are you at a plateau? Or does it get worse?
You know, it was the worst probably 6 months leading up to the divorce. So the divorce was actually, in a lot of ways, kind of like this break for me.
How long did you live apart before your divorce?
About a month.
Wow, that was fast.
Yeah.
And this was like the microwave relationship.
Yeah.
Like, ding, it's done.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh yeah, I mean,
6 month courtship.
She was out. She was out on the road with a band that she played with. And before she left, she was like, "I want us to separate this month, and when I come back, we'll go see our counselor and we'll talk. We'll figure this out."
Mm-hmm.
And the way it was phrased was that, like, I just need this time. We'll come back. We'll figure it out. Whatever.
Yeah.
So, but literally, like, I was in our apartment that whole time by myself.
Mm-hmm.
She came home the night she came home and pretty much like walked in the door leading with like, "I want a divorce," which was again very just like psychedelic of an experience. Like the whole thing seemed so.
Oh man, I remember when my first wife told me she wanted to get a divorce, and I just launched out of my body.
Yeah, it's a weird feeling, man. It was really.
Well, you've also been trying so hard. Like, I don't know about you, but in my experience, I was trying to save the marriage, and then to just be told.
I was trying the way I knew how without, like, the ironic part of all of this was the week she left was the week I started my medication.
Yeah.
So, like, in my mind, this whole month was passing and I was, like, finding stability and finding health and finding grounding and confidence and all these kinds of things. So it was almost like I was expecting she would come home and then I would say, "Look.
Right.
Look at what's happened.
Yeah.
I feel so much better.
Yeah.
Like, it's happening. My health is stabilizing." That was more of the rejection than the actual relationship. I think in the beginning I didn't know this, but I think I had already emotionally checked out of the relationship in that same stint of time that I was getting really depressed.
Huh.
And it was just like, I think I was trying to save the marriage out of principle, because my parents got divorced and I wasn't going to do that. Right?
Yeah, no.
Like,
yeah, no, I know.
So then once
for me, like, I was like, I don't know if you've ever like had a friend with a manual transmission who had a bad battery, and you had to push the car to get it to crank.
Yeah.
And they dump the clutch and go zooming off. And if you don't know the rhythm of this thing, you end up, digging a hole with your chin.
Yeah.
And that's what it was like when I was trying to save our marriage. My first wife and I split up, and I was just having all this anxiety and depression, and she was done with it. And one day I came home from lunch from my work, and she told me she wanted a divorce. And I went back to work, and I remember reaching for the phone because I wanted to call the person I was closest to tell them about this terrible thing that happened to me, but it was her. Like,
yeah, that's
was awful feeling.
Yeah, it's weird when you like the person you confide in is no longer that person.
Right.
And for me, the challenge was I was like, so I gotta like fucking start over and tell somebody else all my trauma.
Right.
How's that gonna work?
Right. Exactly.
Like,
you just put an ad on Craigslist. Like,
yeah. Like, hey, super emotionally unstable, unhappy guy looking for someone to dump all his problems on. Like, no, please, I don't have any money either because I'm a poor artist.
Right.
Date me. Like,
420 friendly.
Yeah. Like, what the fuck? What are you supposed to do? So like.
Must like dogs.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think the rejection I felt, it was in a lot of ways it was worse. It was worse than the rejection of like your loved one telling you they don't want you anymore. I think I had already accepted that.
Yeah.
I was like, I know. It was more so that I was like, do you not see the progress?
Right.
Do you not see the shift or the change? Because I think in a lot of ways, the challenge for people with depression is you're constantly seeking some sort of validation, whether it's internal or external. Mm-hmm. And the beautiful thing about depression and healing from it is that if you have a good psychiatrist, a good therapist, and good friends, they will let you know when you are different, because you will be different.
Right.
Your eyes will look different.
Yeah.
Your body language will be different. You know what I mean? Like you'll speak in a different timbre. Like you will be a different person when you're feeling better.
Yeah.
And to not have that recognized can be almost more painful than the depression itself. Because in a lot of ways, at least in my experience, it was almost like this, it was almost like saying, actually, it wasn't even your depression. It's just you. I just refuse to see growth in you because you're stuck in my mind a certain way.
Yeah.
And you'll always be that way. That's how I felt it.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I'm just like, oh, that blows.
Well, because you've shared so much.
Yeah.
Right?
Like
that person has all your secrets. And
that's
now,
the other thing is you're just like, you know a lot. And
right.
I don't know if I have trust anymore.
Yeah.
And that was challenging.
Yeah.
Very trying. But again, like I'm so thankful. The medication and you know, at that point I had been doing yoga for about a year and a half consistently, like every morning. That just really, it saved me, you know?
So you sort of come careening out of this marriage into this. It sounds like you started to work on yourself immediately rather than sort of.
I took no time off. I was seriously like, man, I think in a lot of ways I was just so fed up with
being
how
miserable.
Yeah, I was just like, man, fuck this. I'm done with it. Seriously. I'm done with feeling this awful all the time. I'm done with the pity party. I'm done with justifying my bad behavior with something that I can fix. And I'm not saying that in the way that like I know how hard it is as a depressed person to get off the couch and make that first step. But that's all you have to do is make the first step.
Yeah.
You know, I use Nucci Space out here, and it was incredible. Saved me. Like Leslie saved my life.
Yeah,
you know?
me too.
So
and my wife went there. You know, so many people have been helped by Nucci Space.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And I think, you know.
How long has it been?
Since what? Since
you sort of began this like path of recovery in your divorce and everything.
I think I started taking the steps in June of last year.
Wow. So you're doing really well, in my opinion.
I've been cruising for sure. Like I mean, my cocktail of medications I'm on right now works really well for me.
What are you taking?
I take trazodone, Wellbutrin, and Lexapro.
Wow. Was there a tinkering period where they were trying to dial all that in?
I started on one, and then once I was explaining what was happening, they kind of like added others to counteract and whatever. And sure. I feel like I got really lucky because, you know, a lot of my friends have spent many months trying to find that right combination. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
try not to be too manic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Try not to be too sleepy.
I mean, I've definitely noticed that there's a rhythm, there's a regimen that I need to follow pretty aggressively for it to stay consistent. Basically, like, you know, 1 in the morning, 1 at night, that kind of stuff. Like I have to stick to it. And I know it's working because on the days where I either forget or just don't take my medication, it's different. Yeah. The experience is different. I physiologically feel different. My heartbeat feels different. My vision is different. You know, it's like
yeah, sure.
It's just the experience changes, and that's good for me because it lets me know that something's happening.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, sure. If you stop taking your medication, nothing changed. You'd be like, oh fuck.
Yeah, right? I'd be like, I'm just spending all this money for no reason.
Right. Or this is all in my head. You know, which is much worse.
That is.
Yeah. So meditation, yoga, meds, journaling. You journaling?
Yeah, I journal. I write. You know, just creative writing, really, of any kind. I have a bunch of different notebooks that are kind of for different things.
And you keep them when you're done. The Sarno thing that I talked about with my buddy Phil, who was here a few days ago. You fill up a notebook and you just burn it.
Really?
Yeah.
Man,
you're pouring a lot of rage into it. Like part of the thing with the Sarno thing, as I understand it correctly, because I've only just started reading the book, is that you're really like talking to the notebook about what you're angry about.
Oh, I see.
It's not something your wife needs to see, or your your girlfriend, or your bandmates, or those people that you.
I mean, man, I'm pretty Loctite about anything I write in general.
Yeah,
even songs. Like it, you know, it's such. And it's the only truly private thing that I have in my life because I've built my life in a way to be very communal, and I love that. I love that my life involves a lot of people.
I've always liked that too. My wife's more of an introvert, drives her a little bit crazy. But I'm always like, I'm going to have 25 people over.
Yeah.
Why? Well, because it's Sunday.
Connection, man.
Yeah.
It's, like it, in a lot of ways that brings me out of my funk.
Yes.
Which is so interesting because like I can be in a real pit and feeling really disconnected, and it's like the last thing I want to do is see a bunch of people, and then the minute that I do, I feel so much more rejuvenated.
I've always made a habit, if I've got a friend who's in the tunnel, I'll go get him. Yeah. Take him to lunch.
Yeah.
Not everybody wants that, and if it's a woman, it's a little different. I don't ever feel appropriate about like just like showing up at somebody's house. But I'll tell other women that I know, like, hey,
go,
so and so's kind of could use. But I think it's different for women, and I don't even know really where to start with that. But if it's a buddy of mine, like we're gonna get coffee, we're gonna get tacos, we're gonna go see a movie or whatever.
Man, I have found for me that a very healthy social lubricant amongst the depressed conversation has been cannabis.
Oh yeah,
seriously.
I'm not really a smoker anymore, but for someone like me though, like I have a tendency with everything. Baking bread, I've managed to make that an obsessive pastime.
I follow you on Instagram. I see it.
No, I mean, like, how many loaves of bread can one family eat in a week? Like, why did you make 12 loaves of fucking sourdough bread? So I can't really, like, I don't need to start playing around with intoxicants because I'll just.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I'll bury myself in it.
It's not something that I think is like a universal. Like, it's worked for me, I think, mostly because I started at a young age, and I just have been. And
I mean, I started smoking weed at 10 or 11 years old.
Dang, dude.
My folks were college professors, and there were other kids of college professors, and
you guys were all cool.
There was weed around. I mean, I don't want to call any names now, but definitely there was a girl who was a little older, like 14, and I was 11 or 10 or 11, and she was pilfering weed from her parents' stash, and we would smoke it.
Yeah. I mean,
but I can't do any of that anymore. It's not good for me.
See, that's the thing. It's all just about being aware of what's going on with you.
Every recovery is subjective.
It is.
Yeah,
it really is. And I know some people that have this predisposition, and it's been really helpful for them. I know some that it's sent them further down into despair, and it's like, dude, you got to stop smoking weed.
Right.
You have to stop.
Right.
Like, it's not all good.
Right.
Okay.
Well, the paranoia, if you've already got anxiety, and
yeah.
People can go really way deep in a hole.
And I think too, just being conscious and treating it like, if you're gonna use something, and this is a tip for anybody out there that might be self-medicating out of some sort of fear to seek medicine from a doctor, which is a part of the process sometimes.
Yeah.
If you're gonna self-medicate, make sure you actually are treating it like medicine, because you would not down 6 Lexapros.
Right.
You wouldn't do that.
Right.
Because it says not to do that on the bottle.
Right.
Right.
And it's also your brain chemistry.
Yeah. So I really hear you. If smoking weed helps, maybe don't wake up and like take 2 bong rips every morning before you go to work. Like, just start there.
Right.
Because, I've been there. I've totally been there where it's like, especially when I was still married and kind of like, really trying to figure it out. I was just doing freelance stuff for a very long time, so I didn't really have a job. My hours were very inconsistent. And I would just sit at home, just baked out of my mind, writing songs. And, I had convinced myself it was helping until the end of the day. I'd lay my head down, and I'm like, I still feel terrible.
Yeah.
Dang it.
Well, I don't think you should let intoxicants take the place of the actual work.
No.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. Like, use it as a tool, but again, like, realize that the actual meat of the chunk of stuff you have to do is going to take some.
Well, feelings are hard.
They are. They're so subjective and kind of not real in a lot of ways. Like, in the sense that, I'll just give a personal anecdote that I think is always funny because it's just how my mind works consistently. I'm really bad about feeling like I've disappointed somebody. Comes just with the bag, So it's like, if I have an interaction with somebody that for whatever reason, their body language or something, I've just convinced myself that like they've got a problem with me, they're upset with something I've done. I'll go throughout my whole day creating the world in which this person is disappointed in me, right?
Yeah.
And I'm so convinced that it's real. And then maybe an hour or so later, I'll get a text or a phone call from that person that's just like, man, I loved seeing you today. It was so good to hang out. We got to do this again, man. right?
Yeah.
And it's just like,
Yeah.
okay, so how much stock can I put in that thing in my head that tells me like, man, for sure this person's pissed at you, dude.
I think that instantaneous communication really amplifies that, because there's definitely times when I send somebody a text and they don't respond instantly, and I'm like,
you're like, uh-oh.
They hate me.
Yeah. Yeah, and just, man, letting go of that stuff. And I think a big thing for me was always like, unless I know I've wronged somebody, the way they see me is the way they see me.
Yeah, you don't have any control over the way.
No.
Yeah.
So why let it dictate like my own internal dialogue that convinces me whether I like me or not?
Right.
That should, you know, like,
yeah.
That shouldn't, somebody else shouldn't have that kind of power over my self-care.
Yes. And
I think I'm still learning that one. Yeah. I'm still kind of trying to figure that out, because I'll freak out real quick.
It seems like, though, you're on a really good path right now.
Thank you. I feel good.
Yeah.
I feel like this is the first time I've kind of gotten up over the hill in the long stint of on and off depression and suicidal thoughts and stuff, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had a real bottom right around the same age that you did, and it was a long, slow climb out, but it's never been that bad again.
Yeah.
And so, you know.
Well, you seem really conscious of like what you need for a stable, healthy life. I think that's important. Like,
I could get a little more exercise, but other than that, yeah, I learned not to let my blood sugar drop too far. Yeah. You know, in the secret society that keeps me from using drugs, we say never let yourself get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired.
Wow.
And those are the 4 triggers for me.
Dude, it's so interesting, because when I don't sleep enough, I feel horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible. Sleep
is my theory that the reason that Keith Richards has lived so long is he sleeps until he wakes up every day. No, I think that's a reset. Yeah. Like, how do these people like shoot heroin into their eyeballs for 20 years and not die? Well, you know.
Well, a couple blood transfusions.
Well, they do a full body reset every night. You know.
Yeah.
8 to 10, 11, 12 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
Well, you know, your body can handle a lot of abuse.
It really can
if you're giving it time to recharge. So, you know, as we sort of get to the end part of these interviews, we have this thing I have this thing that I do with the podcast where I have a series of questions that I've been working on.
Cool.
It's sort of based loosely on the Bernard Pivot interview questions, the 10 questions that James Lipson uses at the end of the Actor Studio.
Yeah.
But they're my own questions, because I think everybody's heard those enough now that they've got like a, you know, ask me the one about what turns me on. You know?
Yeah.
Because I've been waiting for someone to ask me that. Like, I don't want to hear your preconceived notion. I've got right now it's 7. That may eventually evolve to 10. I'll go back down to 5 where I started. But,
okay. Lay them on me.
Yeah. The first question is, what is your favorite meal that you've ever had?
Best meal I've ever had.
Favorite,
not
doesn't
best.
have to be best, because I want to make sure that we make the distinction. Like, sometimes you can have a really garbage meal, but it's with exactly the right people at exactly the right time.
Yes.
I've had some camping meals that were anyway. I'm already
okay. No, I get what you're saying. Favorite meal would have to be Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh yeah.
No, Columbus, Ohio.
Okay. The other Cleveland.
If you've never been to Ohio, you'll see.
Yeah.
Columbus with the band I was out on the road with, William Wild, and really great group of guys, very close homies, and we were walking around after the show trying to find something to eat. The options were Taco Bell or this very unassuming Euro food truck in the parking lot across the street.
Yeah.
And I could already hear this like weird fusion Middle Eastern Afrobeat playing out of the guy's speakers. And I was like, that's where we're going.
Yeah, I'm there already.
That's where we're going right now. So we go over there, we walk up, and the guy's got little finger symbols, and he immediately hits him as we walk up, and he's just like celebrating the fact that we're coming to buy food from him.
Oh man.
He gets the...
This is so good already.
It's incredible. It's incredible. So like he gets the Euro meat spinning, and he's like getting everything going. Then he just comes out of the truck holding instruments. He turns the music up, and he just hands us all the instruments, and we just danced and played these instruments with this guy for like 10 to 15 minutes. And then he was like, oh, I got to go make your food. And he like goes back in there, makes me like the best lamb gyro I've ever had. I think my buddy got like chicken shawarma, and it was just like out of the park. We're sitting on the curb eating it, and him and just like this random hippie kid that was just hanging out with him are just like playing cajones and djembes and like shaking shakers, and he's got his little finger cymbals.
Did you figure out where he's from?
I didn't, because the whole thing was a celebration from the time we got there till we left. Like literally no information was exchanged.
Do you know the sort of traditional thing you say in Arabic when something is just absolutely extraordinary?
No.
Alhamdulillah. This is a blessing from God. That can be like something as simple as an amazing meal like that, or it can be something really truly remarkable, like someone survives a terrible miss accident or something.
I mean, it was one of those moments, I think, that I made me realize this is why I like doing what I doing, man, because like
this is my favorite answer I've ever gotten to this so far.
Really?
Yeah, it just encompasses the whole reason I asked the question.
That's great. I'm glad I answered it correctly.
That's amazing. I just wish I knew where that guy was from, because gyro is shawarma and the Turkish doner kebab. They're all kind of similar tradition, but
and they all kind of float. It's hard to tell exactly where it's originating from, and everybody kind of does it different, Yeah,
but and like Al Pastor tacos are from the same meat spiral.
Yeah, exactly.
They came to Mexico City from Greek immigrants. So, yeah. Second question: what is the most frightened you've ever been?
Man, it's really funny. I had a girl ask me this on Tinder once.
Really?
And I did not respond to her because I was like, "The fuck out of here!" What?
I would have been like, "Well, I signed into Tinder, and things have never been the same."
Dude. Y'all don't get on Tinder, please.
I've been happily married for 15 years, so I'm not fucking with any of that.
Yeah. Man, most frightened. I feel like whatever is truly the most frightening thing that's happened to me, I've definitely like blocked it out, and I'll never remember it again, because that's been my coping mechanism for many years.
Okay.
But I would have to say, Man, this is a tricky one. Let's come back to this one. I'll keep thinking on it.
Okay. Of all the things that you've lost, what is the thing that you miss the most or regret losing the most? These are not light questions.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
That's good, though.
Yeah.
I really wish as a kid I would have been nicer to my mom.
Yeah.
Because I think now I see how much compassion she truly showed me as a kid that was like really struggling.
Yeah.
And really angry and confused and upset. And she loved me so unconditionally. And there was a stint where I was just horrible to her.
She's still alive?
Mm-hmm.
You should call her.
I see her. I talk to her every day.
I don't give a lot of advice. I don't believe in advice.
We're very close now.
Yeah.
So it's less of a regret that like I wish I would have done that. So like I'm very thankful that her and I have been able to kind of maintain a relationship. I'm actually house sitting for her right now. I drove here from McDonald's. Yeah. So, but I think even the fact that we have a relationship now makes me even more upset with how I was and
with young Anthony.
Yeah, and I think if there's anything I could change, it would probably be recognizing that sooner.
I wish I could call my grandparents sometimes. They were so kind to me, and I could be such a shitty kid. I look back on those times with absolute horror.
It's a terrible feeling, you know?
There's nothing I can do about it now. It sucks.
Yeah.
You ready to talk about question 2 again yet? The most frightened you've ever been?
I guess when Man, it's so crazy. I just haven't had a lot of I don't have a huge fear of death.
Yeah.
And the only things that I can imagine being truly frightening would be like a near miss or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But that kind of stuff doesn't really scare me. I guess I would probably say the closest I ever came to actually committing suicide was probably the most frightened I've been of myself.
Yeah.
And of the potential to see the split. That was the part I think that really freaked me out.
I read a line in a book once where someone facing death imagined life going on without them, seeing all of the places that they would have been
but just
if they were still alive,
there,
and just the way that the ocean sort of flowed around.
Yeah.
The ocean of life flowed around the place where they had been and closed up and having this absolutely terrifying moment of realization that that's exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And yeah, that stuck with me.
It's so interesting. I'm not afraid of that. I don't know why.
I'm not afraid of it. I just, as a father,
Yeah, that's different. You have more.
There's times when I call my dad or my stepdad or other people who like looked out for me when I was little, and I still go to them for advice. Like, you know, what is term life insurance? I still don't fucking understand it. You know.
Yeah.
And I imagine my daughter not having that because I'm an older parent, and it just fills me with a kind of like desire to go to the gym. You know.
Yeah,
like,
but I think that's good because regardless, everybody should take care of themselves.
Right.
You know, so like, yeah, I think it's good that love is your motivation for that and not self-hatred.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because it could be that. You could be like, I look in the mirror and I fucking hate myself, and that's why I go to the gym.
Fine.
It's like, no, don't do that. Don't do
like,
that.
This belly brought to you by gingerbread. I love
Yeah,
gingerbread.
there you go.
know,
There
I'm
you go.
like,
Yeah.
all worried about that, but the fact that it might eventually like cause me to have heart disease and die before my daughter is old enough to make a lot of the important decisions in life without input absolutely fills me with terror.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's not the most frightened I've ever been, but it's not my interview. What is your favorite place to gig?
Favorite place to gig?
Mm-hmm.
I really
like. What is the place where you throw your guitar in the case? Like, hot damn, I can't wait.
There was a stint in time where I really liked Elliott Street in Castleberry Hills in Atlanta. Because you could just do whatever you wanted there. Mm-hmm. You could literally go down in the basement and it didn't matter, and you just played. It's like a little sandwich bar up at the top, and you go down in the basement, and it's just this like kind of smelly room with like a curb stage. Yeah. And you know the bands always just kind of have to get the sound going. Like there's no, there's just
no
like
engineer.
there's just like a 4-channel board in the back and like 2 bad monitors, and you just kind of like. Somebody's just like tapping the mics, and you just make sure they come through, and then you just go.
So it's like a house party with a business license.
Yeah, that's exactly. Actually, that's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
And that place is really good for me in a lot of ways because like, I literally would throw my guitar in the case, and I would be stoked because I just knew I was gonna get to be really free, and I like that musically. I think in terms of like, if I'm on the road, like other places I've played, I really, really, really enjoyed playing Bowery Ballroom. That was a fucking experience. You know?
Tell me about that gig.
I was out with that same band, William Wild, and we were opening for this band called Joseph. That's like a trio of sisters, and we were kind of riding their coattails at the time. They just signed a deal with ATO, and like they were doing big shit.
Yeah, that's a cool label.
Yeah, it was. I enjoyed kind of tangentially getting to experience what that kind of a tour was like just by being this hired gun for the opener, you know? But yeah, they sold out Bowery, and
wow,
that was the crew, unbelievable. A completely analog rig, big 32 channel, or no, like 48 channel Midas, just full of racks of, you know, he had like what's the Eventide H3000? Yeah. He had like 2 of those and like just racks full of compressors and cassette recorders and all this stuff. And I just knew I was in love with this place. And the monitor mix was incredible. The accoutrements and the hospitality
I don't think I've ever
great.
played Bowery Ballroom, but to do well in New York and be treated well by the crew in New York is, you really feel like you've arrived.
Yeah, because, you know, I don't know, that's a real room. I don't get to play real rooms often. And so to be in that environment where there's almost like this, there's like a reverence.
I was going to say reverential vibe.
Yeah.
You're the thing.
You
like,
know, yeah,
this is a temple to music.
Yes, you're standing on stage and you like. It's so funny. I've been playing for so long that I'm never conscious of being on a stage. Like I never think about the fact that I'm up and people are looking at me. But in a room like that, because you're kind of looking around, just like, holy shit, like we're here.
One of my great ambitions is to play the Ryman for that very reason. Never played the Ryman.
I bet that would be.
Yeah, I got friends who played there, and one of the guys from one of those bands saw a band I was in when I was in my harvest phase, and apparently tickled his recollections of Kenny Buttry, and came to me and was like, "I want you to play on my records."
Yo,
and
did you?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that. I'm such a huge Kenny Buttrey fan. I will say this, though. I did write a loving sort of like thing about Kenny Buttrey at web forum I'm on because I feel like he's underappreciated. I mean, he was making $250,000 a year in the year when he went out with Neil Young.
Yeah.
And that was 70s money. And
which is,
he was Linda Ronstadt's boyfriend. And he was like, and kind of largely not really known by the current crop of players in a lot of ways. And so I think that's a crime. And I wrote about that on a web forum. And also, he didn't die in good financial shape. Like, he spent every one of those dollars.
Yeah.
One of the people who responded to that post was his daughter.
Wow.
She had seen the post and said, I'm just so pleased that people remember my father so fondly.
Man.
And that his last days were spent doting on her, taking her for walks into the park and stuff, and not really chasing a dollar anymore. And he was very much at peace with it. So, yeah, it was
That's
pretty
inspiring,
big.
man. Seriously.
So, visa considerations and income considerations aside, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would you live?
Probably, I spent some time last year in Croatia and Bosnia.
Yeah.
And it was so gorgeous, and the people were so unreal, honestly.
It's not been very long since there was just a brutal civil war there.
Yeah. I mean, I was there, and the churches still have bomb holes and bullet holes, and I went to several monasteries where the entire priesthood was massacred and burned in the tunnels under the catacombs under the monastery, and just like really gnarly stuff. And that was that was really profound for me to be in this place where you're 20 some odd years out from a serious kind of aggressive, violent, totalitarian civil war, and the people are still getting together and the church bells are still ringing through all the bomb holes and bullet holes. I mean, it's just like, it impressed something on me for sure.
Something about that environment always resonates with me as someone who's lived through some trauma.
Yeah. I mean, like, you start to see that, when people can rebuild their societal lives so quickly after such like a horrible, like, humane atrocity, it really puts things in perspective for me when I am dealing with my internal inhumane atrocities and kind of the internal civil war that happens with whatever you're dealing with. It was, and it's just beautiful there. I mean, I didn't know that was going to be my like geographic environment, but showing up there, I just felt.
So Zagreb, or?
I was in Medjugorje for a little while. I spent some time in Zagreb and Mostar, and then spent some time in Dubrovnik on the coast in Croatia, which was gorgeous. But yeah, I mean, even some more rural parts of Croatia, I mean, it's just like, I couldn't get over the natural beauty.
Yeah.
I like that temperament and that pace.
Next question. If you weren't going to play music, is there another job that you think you could be satisfied with?
I love woodworking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like furniture, or carpentry, or restoration, or
probably furniture and some carpentry. I enjoy fixing things a lot, and I enjoy kind of the creative engineering and problem solving that comes with repairing something, especially if it's with wood. But also, like, fabrication is so fun to me.
Yeah.
I love sketching in my grid notebook, just different ways to kind of like conceptually visualize a piece of furniture, or not even a piece of furniture. Sometimes it's just like, I want to figure out how to build a cool thing for my band one day that I can throw on stage.
Yeah.
Or whatever, My grandfather is a carpenter and has done everything from, I mean, he built the sets for the Shakespeare Theater in Alabama. He's done,
Alabama Shake. Yeah, my wife knows a bunch of those people. Yeah.
It's a cool spot.
Yeah.
It's a cool spot. And like, he, his stories are crazy because, I don't know, he's done so much from that kind of fabrication to furniture rebuilding. He's built house, he's just done everything. So I'm very inspired by that. And I know that it's something that's within my wheelhouse if I put the effort and time into it,
Yeah. I only asked that question academically. I spent 2 years not playing it was the most miserable. I mean, it wasn't miserable until the very end when I suddenly realized that I was miserable.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I don't think it's certainly not like maybe you should do that. It's not what I'm asking.
No, totally.
Yeah.
I just anything with my hands really is gratifying for me.
Yeah. My big fear about woodworking is saws.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely am very conscious that if I cut a finger off, I'm done.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
you know, and there were a couple times I had a scare on a miter saw a couple months ago that put me out. Since then, I haven't really gone back because you know I was a good half an inch from losing this guy, and
no good.
Yeah.
Last question: what is your perfect instrument, and do you own it or not?
Like a dream instrument that just feels incredible to play, like just a butter.
Yeah. Or just an idea, like if you don't own it, like is there a Martin out there? Or?
Dude, my classical guitar that I've had since I was 16 to this day, I mean, it's in my truck right now. I really seriously think it's the greatest guitar ever made.
Yeah.
I fucking love it.
Who made it?
It's made by Kamarasca.
I don't even know who that is.
French-Canadian company.
Yeah. Oh, man, there's a sort of big French-Canadian guitar tradition.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I mean, there's a Godin hanging on the wall right there. Yeah.
I think seagulls are French-Canadian now.
Are they? Is that Larrivee that's also there too?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, it's a very well-made guitar. It's from the early 80s, and it's like one of the only guitars I've ever owned that, like, I put a pickup in it, and I plug it in, and it still sounds like the guitar.
Right.
That never happens.
Yeah.
That literally never happens.
No, because it changes.
It really changes. Yeah. And so, like, that was something that made me realize this guitar was special. Like, its sound was so overpowering of any other variable in its environment. Like, it was just going to sound the way it should. And it records extremely well, which is important to me.
Is that guitar on the Mr. Mustache record?
It's not. Well, actually,
there's some nylon string things happening in that waltz.
I think that was my great-grandfather's old Sears nylon.
No kidding.
Yeah. Which is at my mom's house currently.
Cool.
Yeah. I don't think I really used... It was funny because the guitar that I now adore and sing the praises of sat in closets from house to house in Atlanta for years because I was like, I don't play nylon guitar.
Right.
You know, it's like, this isn't important to me.
Right.
And now I probably play that pretty exclusively. I don't own many other guitars because in the divorce, a lot of gear got split because we were both musicians. So the stuff that I took was just kind of, you know, or the stuff that I kept and didn't sell was just stuff that I knew was going to be a staple, and that guitar is just hung around.
Yeah. Well, man, this has been great.
As always.
I'm really glad you came. I'm really grateful.
I'm thankful that you had me. I feel like all we did was just recorded us hanging out, which is cool.
Well,
you know,
we talked about some important stuff, though.
We did.
Yeah,
we did. I appreciate you gently asking those questions.
Well, I mean, there's no other way to. This is definitely not gonna. We have ways of making you talk kind of conversation.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, man.
Yeah, of course.
Man, that was a great conversation. I really like that guy. I'm really grateful that he made the time to come and talk to me on my podcast. I want to remind everybody that all of the music that you hear on the Crash and Ride podcast is from the Athens band, The Powder Room. It's from their first record, Curtains. I played in that band, but not on that particular record. You can check it out at thepowderroom.bandcamp.com. Throw them a few dollars, show them some support. I played on their second album, which is called Lucky. That's also available at Bandcamp. They're a great band. I would encourage you to also follow the links in the show notes so that you can keep track of what Anthony's up to. He plays a lot of music, makes a lot of records. He's a really talented young guy, and he's worth your time. Also, 5'8" and Pinky Doodle Poodle, my two main bands these days, have social media accounts. Find us on Facebook, find us on Instagram, find us on Twitter. Come see us play shows, support local music in your town, support bands that are coming through your town to play. I mean, we're out here, and we'd love to meet you. Come show us your beautiful face and buy a t-shirt and put that money straight in the gas tank, I promise. Remember, if you need the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, that number is 1-800-273-8255. They have trained volunteers who are there to listen and help you out and connect you with community resources if you need help. It's 24/7, it's confidential, it's free. Just reach out, 1-800-273-8255. Remember, be here tomorrow. Take care of yourself. Be kind to yourself. and loud guitars save lives. Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Crash and Ride podcast. I'm Patrick Ferguson. I'm your host. Today's guest is Anthony Aparo. Shit. Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Crash and Ride podcast. I'm Patrick Ferguson. I'm your host. Today's guest is Anthony. Fuck me. Oh, fuck. All right. Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Crash and Ride podcast. I'm Patrick Ferguson. I'm your host. Today's guest is Anthony Aparo. Why is that so fucking hard to say? Okay. Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Crash and Ride podcast. I'm Patrick Ferguson. I'm your host. Today's guest is Anthony. Fuck me. Fuck. Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Crash and Ride podcast. I'm Patrick Ferguson. I'm your host. Today's guest is Anthony. Fuck. Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Crash and Ride podcast. I'm Patrick Ferguson. I'm your host. Today's guest is Anthony Aparo. He's a singer-songwriter based out of Atlanta. He's also a producer, an engineer, and a session musician. He plays a whole lot of instruments. He plays guitar, bass, drums, keys, and cello, as well as some instruments he probably forgot to mention. We talk about depression. Fuck me. God damn it. Hello. Fuck. God damn it. Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Crash. God damn it. Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Crash and Ride podcast. I'm Patrick Ferguson. I'm your host. Today's guest is Anthony Aparo, a session. Fuck me. God damn it. Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Crash and Ride podcast. I'm Patrick Ferguson. I'm your host. Today's guest is Anthony. Fuck me. God damn it. Anthony Aparo, you're.